Folks, let's go ahead and start, and we'll pray and then get started here. Lord, I want to thank you for this week. So many things happen. It's beautiful weather. I thank you for the folks that are here, Lord. My prayer is that you give us a understanding of your plan a little bit better, so that we can live our lives with with an urgency, Lord. So I thank you for what you're going to do, Lord. I ask you to fill us with your spirit and teach us. Lord, I pray for those that aren't doing all that well. I lift up to you Shirley's brother, Joe, and I pray for Alan and Lisa, Lord, that you would bless them, that you'd help Alan feel better, and you'd give Lisa comfort. I pray for Paul, who's not doing too well today, that you'd bless him too. And then, Lord, I lift up to you the service today, that you bless those that are all serving and those that are listening, or that your words would touch their hearts. So we give this time to you, Lord, now in Jesus' name. Amen. Howdy. Hey, Mike. Okay, well, because there are a lot of things happening, because this book looks forward to future events, I spend a little more time in review so that we can get a foundation for our current lesson. So we're going to review just a bit here. Okay, so in this portion of Revelation from chapter 4 on, we read about the transition from the church age to the final 7 years. Now, according to Daniel 9, the purpose of this period is focused on the Jewish nation and the Old Covenant. So the focus of the 7 years is on the Jewish nation, the Old Covenant. This does not include the church, as she's part of the New Covenant. Throughout Israel's history, God has sent prophet after prophet warning Israel of judgment that would come. Listen to what God said through Jeremiah, Malachi, and Isaiah, just a few different prophets through the ages. In Jeremiah, he says, "The bellows blow fiercely, the lead is consumed by the fire. In vain the refining goes on, but the wicked are not separated." So Jeremiah is talking about how again and again God's trying to refine his people, but they're not separated the way they should be. In Malachi, we read, "But who can endure the day of his coming? And who can stand when he appears? For he is like a refiner's fire and like fuller's soap. He will sit as a smelter and purifier of silver, and he will purify the sons of Levi and refine them like gold and silver, so that they may present to the Lord offerings in righteousness." And then finally in Isaiah we read, "Behold, I have refined you, but not as silver. I have tested you in the furnace of affliction." So God's telling the nation of Israel how he is refining them, and it's through their affliction, and we call it tribulation. So this period of tribulation is designed to bring Israel basically to their knees, and they'll come to an understanding of who Jesus is, who their Messiah is, as they call out to him. Now, as Jesus was coming into Jerusalem, he wept over the city and he said, "Jerusalem, Jerusalem, who kills the prophets and stones those who are sent to her. How often I wanted to gather your children together, the way a hen gathers her chicks under her wings, and you were unwilling. Behold, your house is left to you desolate. For I say to you, from now on you will not see me until you say, 'Blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord,' until they acknowledge that Jesus came as their Messiah." Hundreds of years even earlier, God spoke through Hosea, and he said, "I will go away and return to my place until they acknowledge their guilt and seek my face. In their affliction, they will earnestly seek me." So you see that it's a period of affliction that's going to make the people turn to Messiah. And we read in other places in Zechariah where they'll notice the one that they have pierced, and things will become a reality to them, you may say. Whoops, excuse me. Okay. In Daniel 2 and 7, we learned that there would be a period called the Age of the Gentiles that would begin with Babylon's conquering Jerusalem. The 70 years in captivity gave the land its Sabbath's rest that had been violated for 490 years. So God took them out of Jerusalem and put them into Babylon. During the next 70 weeks, or 490 years, that's the area in the green, Israel would be making amends for the disobedience under the Old Covenant. So this age of the Gentiles would continue until Jesus' second coming. So they paid for the land by being out of the land, and they got back in the land, but they still had the 490 years which was to pay for their disobedience. And we find that in Leviticus early on. And I had given you those verses before. I can always do it again. The 7-year period just prior to Jesus' return is called the tribulation, the time of Jacob's trouble, more specifically. And this final 7 years of tribulation must happen before the Lord can come back. It must happen, okay? Jesus' second coming is not imminent. There are certain details that must happen before his second coming. And we've read about some, and we're going to read about more of them this week. Some of these are world wars, increasing famine, increasing earthquakes, church apostasy, Israel in her land, 10 kings will be ruling, the church will be resurrected or raptured, a covenant with Israel, and Elijah returning. I know that last one might catch some of you off guard, but this has to happen. The church, however, needs nothing to happen for the resurrection or rapture to take place. That's why in the passage in Mark 13 can kind of seem almost cryptic. After Jesus explained what would happen in the tribulation, he gave the parable of the fig tree, explaining that when you see these things begin to happen, know that the time is near. So we're watching out there. We see wars, we see famine, we see earthquake, we see the church falling away. We see different things happening, and they're all happening together. It's like, open your eyes up. The time's getting close. Mark 13:32 says, but of that day or hour, no one knows, not even the angels in heaven, nor the Son, but the Father alone. And that's kind of stumps us a little bit. And that's one of the reasons that I was explaining to you about the wedding ceremony of the Jewish people, more pointedly, the Galileans, because Jesus used this picture of the betrothal and wedding throughout his ministry to describe various aspects of the church, his bride, and him, the bridegroom. In this Mark passage, when Jesus said of that day and hour, no one knows, not even the angels in heaven nor the Son, but the Father alone, he points back to the unknown period between when he left to go and prepare a place for his bride and the timing of when his Father would send the Son to get his bride. In the wedding custom, it was the Father who decided the time when the Son would go back and get his bride. So the Son is building on the house. You know, can you imagine this? If you're a son and you're at your father's house, you're going to try to get everything done as fast as you can, right? Because you want to go get your bride, right? But it's the father that's going to make sure that and he's going to say, go get her, okay? The important detail for the bride or us was to be ready for his return. In the next 5 verses of Mark, Jesus called for the church to keep alert 4 times. You know, he says something once or twice or 3 times. He's nailing on what we should be doing. He says, take heed, keep on the alert, for you do not know when the appointed time will come. It's like a man away on a journey who, upon leaving his house and putting his slaves in charge, assigned each one his task, also commanded the doorkeeper to stay on the alert. Therefore, be on the alert, for you do not know when the master of the house is coming, whether in the evening, at midnight, or when the rooster crows, or in the morning. In case he should come suddenly and find you asleep. What I say to you, I say to all, be on the alert. So you see him hammering this away. Our eyes have to be awake, okay? That doesn't mean you never go to sleep. It just means that while you're awake, you're just not frittering away your time to such a point that you don't see what's going on. Jesus could come at any moment for the church, yet there are a number of things that have to be in place for his second coming. Now, until we are taken into heaven, we should be living a life of urgency and watchfulness and being about kingdom's business. Because, you know, once we get raptured, once we get gone up to heaven, we can't do the things we can do here on earth. So we're here for a purpose. So our eyes should be open to that. 2 weeks ago in chapter 4, John was taken in the spirit up to the throne room of God. There he recorded what he saw. He witnessed one sitting on the throne with colors of sardius and jasper. He was surrounded by an emerald rainbow, and there was flashing and lightning coming from the throne. And around the throne were 24 elders. They were sitting on thrones, and there were 4 living creatures with 4 faces around the throne of God, giving praise continually to the one who sits on the throne. These 24 elders represent the entirety of the church being in heaven. They have white robes, which represents the righteousness. They're sitting on thrones, rule as Jesus said we would, wearing crowns, which are crowns of reward. They're in physical bodies with the completeness of the Holy Spirit in heaven, and they're called in the next chapter kings and priests. So when you add all these things together, it's the church. In chapter 5 last week, John saw in the right hand of the one on the throne a scroll with 7 seals, and a strong angel proclaimed, "Who is worthy to open the seal?" And there was no one found in heaven, on earth, or under the earth that was found worthy. And John began to weep greatly. He didn't know what was in the scroll, but he understood the magnitude of the need of it to be opened. Then one of the elders told John to stop weeping because the Lion of the tribe of Judah, the root of David, had overcome as to open the scroll. Now, these two terms are messianic, referring to Jesus as he was from the tribe of Judah and from David's lineage. When John turned around to see the Lion of the tribe of Judah, the root of David, instead he sees a lamb standing as if slain. And the lamb has 7 horns and 7 eyes, which represents omniscience and omnipotence. In Revelations 5:9, we hear, "Worthy are you to take the book and to break its seals, for you were slain and purchased for God with your blood men from every tribe and tongue and people and nation. You have made them to be a kingdom of priests to our God, and they will reign upon the earth." The worthiness of the lamb being slain to purchase all men had to do with the role in which Jesus took on. The eternal word became flesh so that he could be our kinsman redeemer. He came as we are, yet he wasn't encumbered with our debt of sin. He was sinless. He willingly went to the cross to pay our debt. So he fulfilled everything that needed to be for him to be our stand-in, you might say. If you missed last week's class, the reference to the role of kinsman redeemer is found in Leviticus chapters 25 to 27. Good with slow reading. And the book of Ruth. The book of Ruth gives us the kinsman redeemer's role played out in the lives of Naomi and Boaz and Ruth. The importance of this sealed scroll involves what is inside and the qualifications of the one who can open it on the outside. So before he could open it, he had to be qualified, which he did. So now we're going to see him as he opens the scroll, but not quite yet, because we're going to go to another chapter here. Now, as this scroll is open, we're going to see a systematic series of events that will unfold on planet Earth, in which God's plans for his final week will be revealed. This will involve the revealing of Satan's man of lawlessness and how he will rise to power, a false world religion who seduces the world, the deception and betrayal of Israel leading to their persecution, and as a result, having their eyes opened as they call out for Messiah Jesus to come and save them. Yes, sir.
Did I hear correctly last week that the scroll kind of represents, you went to Jeremiah and described that he had bought, while they were in Babylon, he bought this property.
Right.
He sealed it and it's protected until they came back.
Yeah.
You kind of made an analogy there of Jesus return.
Yeah.
Jesus getting the.
I think it's a picture to me. I see it's a picture because it was just like Jeremiah would think, what's the purpose? I'm going to lock this away. But God was saying, because you will be returning. And the scroll in Jesus' hand is in a safe place, just as that one in Jeremiah was in a safe place. And when he returns, he is going to take what he has purchased. So that's what I see there.
So the scroll is symbolic of Jesus receiving that which the Father is.
I think it's a number of things. It's like a land deed, and it's also like the opening up of what he's going to do to get that land. Because there's a lot of things that have to come up, because you got Satan being the god of this world, so he's going to have to be purged out of here. Israel's going to have to come to know him, so it's a slow unveiling before what we want to see happens. So Jesus, in turn, he's going to purge the land of its usurpers, which are, those of the satanic realm, you might say, unbelievers, taking possession and restoring the land that had been handed over to Satan at man's fall in the garden. In Revelation 6, we begin to see the seals being opened. You got to hold on, Sharon, because I'm going to go to Matthew first. In Revelation 6, we begin to see the seals being opened in heaven and what manifests on earth as this happens. However, before we look at Revelation 6, let's look at some indicators that Jesus gave us of this period of time and is in what is known as the Olivet Discourse. And you see that in Matthew 24, Mark 13, and Luke 21, all three of those, okay? Shortly before Jesus' crucifixion, I think it was only a few days, they're leaving the temple area, and Jesus came out from the temple and was going away when his disciples came up to point out the temple buildings to him. Look at what big stones they are, and you can kind of, and you can kind of see what big stones these are, because you can see humans here. And I've seen some that were on base foundation that was like 3 times the size of these. So, and he says to them, do you not see these things? Truly, I say to you, not one stone here will be left upon another, which will not be torn down. That had to be amazing to them. As he was sitting on the Mount of Olives, the disciples came to him privately saying, tell us, when will these things happen? What will be the sign of your coming? What will be the sign of the end of the age? Okay, so he's asking them 3 different things here. And as you read the Olivet Discourse, you're going to find how Jesus' answers to his disciple aligns with that which we read in Revelation 6. You're going to see some things that are very similar. I do want to mention too, this building was built. It wasn't completed until 40 years after Jesus was crucified. So you figure, say he's crucified in 30 AD, 33, 40 years later it's built. And what happens right after that? It's destroyed by Romans, right? So kind of amazing there. The Olivet Discourse in Matthew 24, 4-6. And Jesus answered and said to them, see to it that no one misleads you. For many will come in my name saying, I am the Christ, and will mislead many. You will be hearing of wars and rumors of wars. See to it that you are not frightened, for those things must take place, but that is not yet the end. So he responds to what would be signs that we would see throughout the ages. And he said, just because you see these things, that doesn't mean the end is coming. Okay, I see wars here and I see false Christ here and people misleading, but that doesn't mean it's the end yet. He tells his disciples to watch out for deception. Watch out for deception. Turn on any religious program and just filter. Turn on any show that's made that has a biblical narrative and watch for the errors, whether it's, Noah or one of these other things, and watch them. We go, hey, that's not right. That's not right. He says to his disciples to watch out for deception. He says, see to it that no one misleads you. Many will come in Christ's name saying, I am the Christ, and mislead many. I went online to look at people who claim to be Christ. I could not fill the pages that were in there. Everything from the 18th, 19th, 20th, and 21st century. I'll give you just a little sprinkling of these in the 20th century. Jim Jones, People's Temple, led his followers into mass suicide at Jonestown, Guyana. Charles Manson, the family, you remember? Sun Myung Moon, the Unification Church, or the Moonies, same thing, claimed to be church. Hello. David Koresh, the Branch Davidians in Waco, Texas. There was a siege that left 54 adults and 21 children dead. Though he never directly claimed to be Jesus himself, he proclaimed that he was the final prophet and the Son of God, the Lamb. Okay, so same thing, right? Remember Marshall Applewhite, the Heaven's Gate cult. And his followers committed mass suicide so that they could rendezvous with a spaceship hiding behind the Hale-Bopp comet. He must have had some kind of special control for that. Weren't those the guys also that all dressed in sweats and white Nikes or something like that? Something to that point. But that's just that we would remember. That would, yeah, they were comfortable, So these are a few in the 20th century of the hundreds of individuals who have claimed this title in 18th through the 21st centuries. When people say that Jesus has come or he is here, we can ignore it. Because when he comes, we're going to be with him. We're going to be with him, okay? So if they go, there he is. No, can't be, man, because when he comes, the Bible says that we're going to be with him. Next, Jesus told his disciples that they would be hearing of wars and rumors of wars, and not to be frightened because this has to happen. He said, but that is not yet the end. And ever since I can remember, there's always been a war. Whether it was, I wasn't around in World War II, but you had the Korean War, the Vietnam War. We shifted over to the Middle East wars in Afghanistan, and you just name it, skirmish after skirmish, place after place. In other words, we're going to be seeing wars and saber rattling all throughout the world at various times, but that is not the sign of the end. Jesus continued to say what would be signs of the end. He said, for nation will rise against nation and kingdom against kingdom. And in various places there will be famines and earthquakes. But all of these are merely the beginning of birth pangs. A little bit different from wars and rumors of wars. He's saying nation will rise against nation and kingdom against kingdom. He said that hearing of wars was something that had to happen, but it wasn't the end. But then he goes on to say that when the nation rises against nation and kingdom against kingdom, it's pointing to a certain type of war that involves all kingdoms and nations. And we know of these wars looking through our history. They're known as world wars, right? They didn't exist before the 20th century. In 1914, World War I began and involved 88% of the world. The total number of military and civilian casualties in World War I was about 40 million. Estimates range from around 15 to 22 million deaths and about 23 million wounded personnel, military personnel. And World War I had a special name. It was called the War to End All Wars. Like after this, there's not going to be another, right? That's it. But what happened then 21 years later? World War II, right? World War II involved 95% of the world's nations. Some 75 million people died in World War II, including about 20 million military personnel, 40 million civilians, many who died because of deliberate genocide, massacres, mass bombings, disease, and starvation. And that's why I had this picture of Auschwitz on there, because, sometimes you think about just the fighting, the battles that happened, but there were people being killed during this whole campaign. This is not to be confused with localized wars in the Middle East, Korea, Vietnam, Afghanistan. World wars involved the world. 22 million deaths in World War I, 75 million deaths in World War II. Do you see an escalation there? Okay. Pardon me? 95% of the world of the nations took place there. Jesus said nation would rise against nation and kingdoms against kingdoms, and they would be as birth pangs, increasing in intensity and frequency. This is the same passage, but I'm underlining different things here. For nation will rise against nation and kingdom against kingdom, and in various places there will be famines and earthquakes, but these are merely the beginning of birth pangs. So you got the nation against nation and the famines, he's going to say when all these things come together. There's always been famines, but Jesus tied famines in various places with the beginning of birth pangs. In other words, when the end of the age approaches, famines won't be common, they will be everywhere and they'll affect everyone. And this global famine site, is called Global Research. You can go on there and you can actually punch in dates that you want to see, and it'll show you exactly what's happening throughout the world on this. So famines are going to be everywhere, but you see a rise in this. As this time grows closer and the birth pangs intensify, there will be famines in places where you would not expect to see famines. You can read that little article up there. I think that's in Yemen. I'm not absolutely positive, but I think that's where that picture took place. Again, back to that same passage. For nation will rise against nation, kingdom against kingdom, and in various places there will be famines and earthquakes. But all these things are merely the beginning of birth pangs. Okay. Again, you look at the US chart, look at the difference between 2 years of 2009, 2010, earthquakes almost doubled there. You have worldwide, you see the escalation of that too. By these charts, you can see that there's a constantly an increase. And I was talking to Carol earlier saying that Oklahoma now has more earthquakes than California. I remember people going, I don't want to go to California, they got earthquakes, But now you got earthquakes and tornadoes, right? Yeah. Hold on. There's been little dust swirlies up in Sacramento before. Okay. So worldwide, the intensity of quakes have been increasing as well. And this just shows some of the, I had another map where things are just covered and they show different tectonic plates and all this, but these just show you through, 1900 to 2017, you see some of those major quakes, 9+0, and then 8.0 is a red, and on and on. And Jesus said that all these things, world wars, famine, and earthquakes, are merely the beginning of birth pangs. Okay, so when you see all these things, there's a beginning of that. What are birth pangs? Well, people know what, if looks could kill, I'm dead. Okay. Sure. Many of the conditions characterizing the first half of the tribulation have existed to an extent throughout human history, but will appear in a greatly intensified form during the period of the tribulation. Birth pangs begin when birth is ready to come. They bring pain that at first are mild and then they intensify. They interrupt normal life. As time goes on, the contractions get stronger and stronger until these intense contractions begin to come in shorter and shorter frequency. And then there's birth of a new life. So it's going to be in the tribulation as deception, wars, famines, earthquakes, and persecution intensifies and comes in shorter frequency until Jesus returns and reigns on the throne in the millennium. As this world approaches the end of the age, these signs will increase. So when you read about it, don't just think, oh, they're always there. Read about them a little bit. You just say, wow, that was a big one over there. Over in Indonesia, that was a big one. They're getting to be more and more big quakes, different places, or in rapid motion here. Another sign that was prophesied was that Israel would be in the land again. Not necessarily all the Jews, but a substantial amount. In Ezekiel 20, 33 to 37, I'm not going to read it, but I'm going to tell you what it says, and you can read it. God tells his people that he will gather them from where they are at, scattered, and bring them back into the land. There he will enter into judgment with them, just as he entered into judgment with their fathers. So he's going to bring them back, and then he's going to judge them. They came back in 1948. That doesn't mean they're going to be judged right away. He's saying, I'm going to get you in the land, and there you're going to be judged. This did happen in 1948. Malachi said that before the end of the age, there would be the return of Elijah the prophet. And you ever look at like a Passover meal? They take a cup of wine, they place it at the center of the table, and an empty chair is placed for the return of Elijah, because it could be any moment, they believe. Then they open the front door and they greet the prophet, and they say this. They say, he's not there, but this is what they say. Oh, pour out your wrath upon the nations that know you not, and upon the kingdoms that call not upon your name. For they have devoured Jacob and laid waste to his land. Pour out your indignation upon them, and let the fierceness of your anger overtake them. Pursue them in anger and destroy them from under the heavens of the Lord. And the preferred door of opening is the one that faces east, because tradition predicts that when Messiah comes, he's going to come from the east. So it's natural to assume that the forerunner of Messiah is also going to come to the east. This is Jewish thought on this, okay? Malachi 4, 1 through 6 says, again, I'm not going to read it, I'm going to tell you what it says. You can read it. God says that he will send you Elijah the prophet before the great and terrible day of the Lord. His purpose will be to restore the hearts of the fathers to their children, and the hearts of the children to the fathers. His appearance and ministry at this time seems to be in order to return the people to orthodoxy, okay? Now, Jesus said about John the Baptist, surely Elijah is coming, but I tell you, Elijah has also come. It's as if they would have recognized the forerunner as John the Baptist, they would have received their Messiah, and that was great. Because they didn't, Elijah will come at the end time, and he will return the hearts of the fathers to the children and the children to the fathers. And just think about this for a second, because you've got, in that day, you're going to have Jews wanting to have temple worship, right? But if you've been living in Israel for a long time, it's not really a big deal, I mean, generations have gone by. What would be that would you even want to go and sacrifice an animal in the temple, But if you have the prophet returning, talking about the importance of what you're doing, it returns the people to thinking the way they're supposed to, as in God's way of looking at things. So I think that's one of the things he's going to be doing. So some of the signs of the end of the age, world wars, increasing famines, there's check marks between things that have happened, increasing earthquakes, church apostasy, Israel regathering land. There's still, we read at Daniel 2 and 7 that there's going to be 10 kings ruling. The church will be resurrected or raptured. There'll be a covenant signed with Israel. We read about that in Daniel 9, and Elijah will return. We read about that in Malachi 4. So these are some of the signs that we've seen happening and increasing. Now let's take a look at Revelation 6. Yeah, come on, huh? Okay. Revelation 6, 1 and 2. Then I saw when the Lamb broke one of the seven seals, and I heard one of the four living creatures saying, as with the voice of thunder, "Come." And I looked, and behold, a white horse, and he who sat on it had a bow, and a crown was given to him, and he went out conquering and to conquer. So John is his attention is taken away from looking at the Lamb. It had been an awesome sight as this Lamb took something from the one on the throne, and he begins to open these seals. He probably is affixed to this, and then he hears a living creature says, "Come." So he turns his attention and he sees what is the result of that seal being opened. And it's the first seal of the living creature directs his attention. In Revelations 19, 11 through 16, we read about the return of Christ. He's seated on a white horse. On his head are many diadems or crowns, which is the word for a kingly crown. His eyes are a flame of fire, and out of his mouth comes a sharp sword, so that he may strike down the nations and rule them with a rod of iron. Because Jesus returns on a white horse, and because there's a white horse in Revelation 6:2, some believe that this is Jesus. However, this is wrong. Okay, this is not Jesus coming back. As Jesus said in Matthew 24, 4-5, see to it that no one misleads you, for many will come in my name saying, "I am the Christ," and will mislead many. Although at this point he doesn't say that he's the Christ, later on he's going to claim to be God. Okay, so you understand that Satan is always laying his groundwork for his next move that he's going to make too. Look at the contrast. The one on the white horse in Revelation 6:2 had a bow, no arrows, by the way, while the one on the white horse in Revelation 19 has a sharp sword coming out of his mouth. And this is one of the descriptions of Revelations 1:16 that said it's Christ. Okay, the one on the white horse in Revelation 6:2 had a crown given to him, while the one on the white horse in Revelations 19 had many crowns. The crowns are different. The crown given in Revelation 6:2 is a victor's crown, and the word is Stephanos, while as though I said before, the one in Revelation 19 had many kingly crowns, which are called diadems. They're ruling crowns. Okay, the one on the white horse in Revelation 19 is further described as having eyes like a flame of fire, which was another description of Jesus in Revelation 1:14. So you're connecting these pieces together, and you go, this is Christ. I don't know who this is. Furthermore, it's Jesus that is opening the seals in heaven while the rider of the white horse is going forth. He's opening this, so it's not the same person, okay? The rider in Revelation 6:2 who's going out conquering and to conquer is one in the place of Christ, known as the Antichrist. Antichrist means against Christ or instead of Christ, or it could be both. He's known by many names. He's known by the seed of the serpent, the coming prince, the little horn, the lawless one, the son of destruction, and on and on and on and on. Many, many names. This rider has a bow, but there's no mention of arrows. That's like somebody pointing a gun at you with no bullets. It's an intimidation, yet it can't really, go forward with it. It suggests that there's an attack coming. He's wearing a crown of achievement and not a crown of a natural born king. In Daniel 7:8, we read of the little horn who rose up among the 10 kings and uprooted 3 of them. So he's not one of the kings. He's one who came up later. Okay. And that's why I went through Daniel early on, and you almost got to keep on referring back to different things so it can kind of solidify it in your mind. His crown suggests that he's a man of either military or political or both power. Okay, he will be an intimidator. With this first act of tribulation, Jesus sets loose this individual who makes his entrance on the scene to conquer. Doesn't happen all at once, but it begins here. He earns a crown that was given to him, the authority at first by threats rather than actual military action. Then he broke the second seal. I heard a second living creature saying, "Come." And another, a red horse, went out, and to him who sat on it, it was granted to take peace from the earth, and that men would slay one another, and a great sword was given to him. Okay, so again in heaven, the Lamb breaks the second seal, and then he's directed by the second living creature to come. And look what's going on as the seal's being broken. And John sees a red horse with a rider who has been granted to take peace from earth. Understand, everything you see on earth goes through God's hands first. Nothing happens apart from him. It's his method of how he's bringing to an end of the age. And the writer is granted to take place a peace from earth, and that men would slay one another. The symbol of this is a great sword was given to him. Okay, this vision is known as the complete vision is known as the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse, and they are connected, all 4 of them. Although the colors vary, these riders are all tied together in their entrance on horses. The first rider entered on the scene with the threats of war. The second rider brings war so that men would slay one another. World war could very well be. Everything that's happening is controlled from heaven. Just understand that, okay? Revelation 6:5. These are short because there's only two verses per each one, okay? When he broke the 3rd seal, I heard the 3rd living creature say, "Come." I looked, and behold, a black horse, and he who sat on it had a pair of scales in his hand. Can you see the scales in there? Yeah, they're on the side of the horse. Scales in his hand. And I heard something like a voice in the center of the 4 living creatures saying, "A quart of wheat for a denarius, and 3 quarts of barley for a denarius, and do not damage the oil or the wine." Okay, so once again, John is focused at the Lamb. He's in heaven. I mean, what are you going to look at? You're looking at things up there, right? He's focused on the Lamb, and his attention is redirected by the 3rd living creature to what is taking place on the earth. You can almost feel how overwhelming this is to John as he's experienced something he never imagined before. John, his body's on Patmos, and he's seeing the future unfold before him. He's constantly looking at what is happening in heaven and then how it affects the earth. You know, he doesn't know, but, you know, even the disciples didn't have any idea really about the rapture or anything like that. Yeah, they had the wedding scenario. I go to prepare a place for you. If I go, I'll come again to receive you unto myself. They had that, but I don't think they connected all the dots on that. This time, John sees a black horse, and the rider was holding a pair of scales in his hand. From the center of the 4 living creatures, and I would have to imagine that was the one on the throne of the Lamb, John hears something like a voice, okay? Something like a voice saying, "A quart of wheat for a denarius, and 3 quarts of barley for a denarius, and do not damage the oil and the wine." So in its natural progression of threats of war and then war breaking out, the 3rd rider brings what is the result of war, and that's famine. Whenever you look at the destruction of war, when towns are bombed and fields are bombed and people are dead, there's nothing to eat. And because this war is something greater than what has gone before, birth pangs, so also is the resulting famine greater than went before. So what we see as famine is going to be far superior to that. What we see as war is going to be a lot bigger than that. We won't see any of that. These horses are all tied together in the unfolding events, and I see this rider as being the one and the same, okay? The Antichrist, as he rises in his control, I believe what you're seeing is this rider on different horses coming and how he's progressing on rising on the scene as he rises in control. In this passage, he's holding scales. On one side of the scales was placed a weight, and on the other side of the scale was placed that which would equal the weight. So you could buy something. Well, this costs this much. You keep on putting money into it, it's equal, right? In other words, the cost of the product on one side and the money to buy it on the other side. In John's day, a denarius would buy 12 quarts of wheat, which would equal 18 loaves of bread, and this could sustain a family for 2 weeks. And if you were a poorer family, you could buy 36 quarts of barley and be sustained a little bit longer. Wheat was sifted and refined, so it was the more costly one and better. Barley was unrefined, but because you have more, it could go a little bit longer. But in this time of famine, we're going to see that a denarius is going to buy that. Would be a quart of wheat for a denarius and 3 quarts of barley for a denarius. You can see the impact on a famine in this. Can you imagine a worker would work a day to buy a loaf of bread? Well, you need other things to live too, right? And when you make that denarius, by the way, you don't get that whole denarius. Taxes come out of it, okay? Today, it would be like buying a loaf of bread for $60. So in this progression from threat of war to actual war, we see the result as being a super inflated society in which panic, crime, and starvation would be the result. And we've seen hints of this. We've seen hints of panic when we watch on the news and something happens and people are rioting, breaking windows, taking whatever they want and doing this. It's like complete lawlessness. And I envision this kind of thing happening. When you can't get what you want, you'll take it. That's the nature of it. The rider on the black horse is told not to damage the oil and the wine. You can look this up and you're going to find tons and tons of opinions on what the oil and wine is. Okay. I just tell you one thing that I think of, and then you can look on it on your own. These two items, oil and wine, are made from the primary crops in Israel, which are olives and grapes. So this may mean that in some way Israel is spared the severity of this famine. And I said made because I'm not sure. We know that the Antichrist will make a firm covenant with Israel, and perhaps this protects them to some degree against what's happening. I don't know, but that's kind of how I see it might unfold. Revelation 6:7. Then when the Lamb broke the fourth seal, I heard the voice of the fourth living creature. I didn't get pink on that L. That really ticks me off. Okay. All right. When the Lamb broke the fourth seal, I heard the voice of the fourth living creature saying, "Come." I looked, and behold, an ashen horse, and he who sat on it had the name Death, and Hades was following with him. Authority was given to them over a fourth of the earth to kill with sword and with famine and with pestilence and by the wild beast of the earth. So this fourth seal is broken, and the fourth living creature again directs John to look and see what's happening, to observe what's happening. Now, John saw an ashen horse. An ashen horse is yellowish, pale. It's green. The word is chloros. We get chloroform from it. Okay, it's like a dead body. Okay, a dead body that's been laying around for a while. That's what you're looking at. Notice that we actually see two riders on this horse. He who sat on it had the name Death, and Hades was following with him. Authority was given to them. There's a plural there. Death is associated with the body, and Hades with the spirit or soul. Death is the condition, and Hades is the place. They were given authority over a fourth of the earth to kill with sword and with famine and with pestilence and by the wild beast of the earth. This may not mean that a fourth of the earth was killed. It could mean that, but the authority was given to do so. Okay, so the authority was given. Go out, you can take out a quarter of this. Remember, God, the Lamb, is in control of everything that's happening here. So it says, this is what, if they were just going all out to kill, they'd stop at a quarter, because they couldn't go further than that. You can imagine the impact of a global war followed by a famine and the crime that comes out of the need for food. It's kind of weird because you remember when COVID first hit, we went to the stores and I couldn't believe not only what was gone, because I worked in the grocery business for 37 years, how gone that was, but how people were grabbing it before someone else. I want that last, well, that's kind of a junky toilet paper, but but they grabbed it because it was what was left, right? And you kind of get this attitude of what this is going to be like. And along with the death comes disease and pestilence. And that word for pestilence is also death. The wild beast of the earth was one of the curses that was given for failure to obey the law. And if you read in Deuteronomy chapter 28, verses 15 to 68, I know it's a big piece. It goes in and tells you everything that's going to happen if you don't follow this. And these are the things that's going to happen.
Don't follow what?
Don't follow God's law.
Follow the law.
Yeah, if you don't follow God's law, if you do this, this is what's going to happen. If you, curses, the blessings and the curses. You remember, they were told them again, and then they were told them once they crossed the promised land. And if you don't do this, what's going to happen? All these things will come upon you. And some of these things were wild beasts. That would be a horrible thing. We read about, somebody getting killed by a dog or an animal or something like that. That's terrible. But keep in mind, when you read of pestilence and wild beasts, that there are microscopic bacteria that could qualify in this category, things that can take a hold of us. Would you ever have thought that a virus could spread as fast as it did, as we saw in this last year? I mean, it was pretty incredible. It's one of those things that opened my eyes when I saw it, because the first thing I thought of is this is kind of like what the Bible says, something will affect everybody, It's like everybody who has phones is able to see everything in the world. They can, it's closing the connection of the world. So Deuteronomy 28:15-68. In the part before that too talks about the blessings. Like if you do this, you will have many children. They'll be born healthy. Your crops will grow. You'll have rain from heaven in due season. You'll have there won't be you won't be harmed by these different things. But if you don't, it's like God lays it before, right? Okay, so as you look at this is how I see this. These 4 judgments are connected as a group, pacing the Antichrist rise to world power. And you can see how in the midst of worldwide chaos and famine, that people would turn to a person if he had the power and all the answers. You see all these things happening, and and each one of these things is kind of jiggling people. And next time we meet, which by the way is going to be, I'm going to be off for 2 weeks. Gavin is going to be here for the next 2 weeks. Next slide. Okay. And he's going to teach, but I'm going to encourage you to review Revelations chapters 4-7, just to keep it in your mind, because, I will go over it again, but it's really easy to, especially if you put the little parallel passages, Daniel 2, Daniel 7. Oh, that's right. The end of the age, Jesus said, So anyway, any questions? Well, that ended faster than I thought, but that's okay. 4-7, chapters 4-7. Because we're going to keep on going through chapter 6, and you're going to have 2 more of the seals being open, and then which is going to lead to the trumpets. And then in chapter 7, there's going to be 144 witnesses. And understand too that even though these things are laid out, chapter 7, chapter 8, chapter 9, a lot of these things are happening at the same time. It's like if you were telling a story about what happened in World War II, okay, you might start talking about, they were over here and they were assaulting Berlin. And meanwhile, over here, this is happening in Japan, just different things, is going on at the same time. And I believe like the witnesses, the 144,000, they're going to be evangelizing during this time. So we'll talk about that when we get there, because when we get to the 5th seal, you're going to see martyrdom. And so if the church is removed, somebody's got to be talking to them so that they're saved, so that they could be which is called the tribulation saints. Any other questions? There's so many different opinions on this book. I mean, I've seen this in like in Ezekiel and different things, but I think the blessing that we have in some way is the times that we're living at, because I would never thought I'd see things I see today, but yeah, all that comes into play, Right, huh? Right, I know, huh? It's amazing. So anyway, I'll go ahead and close in prayer. Lord, I thank you for showing us some things in this book. And Lord, above all, my prayer is that you'll help us to understand the need to stay vigilant in sharing who you are to this generation before the day comes where you remove the church. And Lord, they won't hear about you again in such a way as that they would be saved in the same way as the church. They will go through tribulation. So my prayer is that you make us strong, bold, help us to be aware, help us to be on the cutting edge of your Spirit telling us where to go and what to say. And Lord, I just pray for blessing on everybody in this class, and those watching, in Jesus' name. Amen. Paul was sick. Paul didn't wake up feeling too good.
Yeah.